Emails from Afar, a chef's culinary adventure around the world. By Mike Sanders.
Chapter 2. The Seed. My stepfather Harry worked for the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, for over 50 years. In those years, Dad spent some time in foreign countries looking for anything from bauxite to molybdenum to, believe it or not, sand. As a result, I was exposed to the world in many different and unique ways at an early age. My family spent every free weekend driving to some out-of-the-way hellhole that only Dad and God knew of. Most of them were hours and hours away, and the use of a dirt road for the last 2 hours of them was always a prerequisite. I remember the family camping for a week 150 miles north of Lance Creek, Wyoming, where it was so empty we didn't see anything but sagebrush and coyotes for 6 days. Dad would talk to us the whole time, pointing out things that had fascinating geological or historical interest. The phrase, "Hey kids, you see that formation over there?" and "Hey kids, you see that range on the horizon?" became all too familiar to us. At the time, I didn't believe anyone could actually know so much about everything. I figured he was making most of it up, or at least embellishing the truth a great deal. And if he wasn't, who the hell cares? Who the hell cares that in 1856 some grizzled old German prospector got lost in the Arizona Canyonlands and started a future ghost town? Don't care, Dad. You see that big brown rock formation over there, kids? It used to be 1,000 miles north of here. Don't care, Dad. This whole area has some really sweet sand deposits, kids. They go on for miles and miles in every direction. Sweet sand deposits? Don't care, Dad. You know, kids, 1,000,000 years ago, this whole area was an inland sea, and we would be deep underwater right now. Pretty neat, huh? Jesus. I wish I was underwater for 1,000,000 years right now. I don't care, Dad. The hours and hours of driving through the vast expanses of the Great West, with its empty sagebrush, oceans of sun-baked rocks and buttes, studded by the occasional abandoned homestead, really did a number on my head. Always in some part of the Lost West, we were never in big cities like Las Vegas or Phoenix or Santa Fe. Hell, we never even saw towns like Billings or Tulsa. We went to places like Riley, Oregon, where the town consists of a single gas station / general store / house, a giant billboard, and not a cross street. Wide spots in the road, Dad used to call them. I swear we once passed through a town in southern New Mexico called Burnt Scrotum. All the while, Dad giving us a fourth-year college-level lecture on where all the freaking sand came from, or why it's called a slip fault. These kind of things mean nothing to an 8-year-old boy, and if you ask me, doing it in an enclosed car for hours and hours at a time is, in fact, a kind of torture. Now, as an adult, I greatly appreciate the education and knowledge he was instilling into us at such an early age. But back then, I felt like one of the family dogs. I didn't understand a word of what was being said to me, and all I wanted was out of the car. I just sat in the back, staring out the window with a blank look on my face as a small amount of drool slid down my chin. At least twice a year we would have a house guest from the furthest corner of the earth. Foreign colleagues and minor dignitaries would come to the U.S. on official business with the USGS, and whenever they'd pass through Denver, Dad would always insist that they stay at our house. Guests would come from far-flung places like Bulgaria, Brazil, Ohio, England, China, or even Vermont. These places were as far away as me as Mars, never to be actually reached or seen. They were just mere points on the ever-expanding cosmos of a child. So, to me, having a visitor from India or Seattle come and share a bathroom for a week was something to akin to having an extended visit by an alien. Frequently, our guests would bring little trinkets or coins for us kids, and Dad would inevitably receive a bottle of some strange colored liquid, usually alcohol, but not always. One colleague, who I believe lived in Alaska, brought a small bottle of seal oil for waterproofing his leather. My siblings and I would examine the gifts over and over, making up elaborate stories about the people on the money or what the little symbols on the coins meant. The toys always smelled a little weird, like spiced plastic with a hint of animal sweat in there. My mother, who worked in the oil industry at the time, would come home and somehow find time to entertain these honored guests with a lavish feast. She had the uncanny ability to whip up the most elaborate meal in what seemed like minutes. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter, so young that my feet didn't dangle off the edge, mind you, pushing poached salmon through a drum sieve. As she whirled about, working her magic over the boiling pots and sizzling pans, Dad and our guests would sit around our large oak dinner table and sample something out of his extensive liquor collection. Dad took great pride in his liquor collection and was eager to show it off. The routine always started the same way, with Dad putting on some, quote, appropriate music, as he always called it. What this usually meant was some Andean flute music or some obscure Spanish folk singer. Once that was done, they would begin to rattle around the cabinet. Sooner or later, they would pull out some dusty old bottle from the back. Closely inspecting the nasty, age-stained label, they would crack off the well-fused top and give it a sniff. After a short pause, a look of certainty would come over their faces, and they would pronounce judgment on its contents. While sipping their chosen poison, they would talk shop, telling tales of past adventures and places I had never heard of. Dad's exploits in the jungles of South America usually got the conversation going. He had a favorite story he'd like to tell, and in fact, it has been told so many times around the dinner table and Christmas trees that, over the years, it has become family lore. It seems that sometime in the 1950s, the USGS needed Dad to go to Bolivia and lead a mapping expedition. The survey took him across the continent, stopping for a few days in each place, then moving on. As the story goes, he and his assistant came up with a planned 3-day outing deep into the Bolivian jungle to survey a very remote area. That was the plan. What it ended up being was 9 days of hacking and struggling through the dangerous South American brush, the whole time trying to convince themselves they weren't lost. According to Dad, on day 5 they ran out of food, and they were reduced to drinking whatever little water they could find as they pressed on through the dense foliage. Dad said that they were trying to keep a level head about it and not freak out over their predicament, but time was running out as fast as their strength, and they knew it. Growing weaker by the day, the jungle seemed to grow deeper and more dangerous the further they went in. By day 9, they stumbled across a small little dirt road carved through the jungle. Actually, Dad said it was barely bigger than a deer trail. Thanking God, they followed it down the mountain. Before long, a native farmer riding a burro came up from the other direction. The farmer could see the condition they were in, and as Dad put it, I think he took pity on the 2 starving gringos. The farmer was kind enough to give him what little food he had. Out of the well-worn saddlebag came 3 limes and a small hunk of stale bread. He handed them to my dad, nodded politely, and then headed off up the trail. Until the day he died, Dad said that meal, 3 limes, some stale bread washed down with some jungle water, was the best meal he had ever had. That experience, the telling and retelling of that story over the years, has led to one of my family's favorite axioms. Hunger is the best sauce. If you're hungry enough, you'll eat it, and you'll probably like it while you're doing it. Hell, you might even ask for seconds. For a future chef, those were words to remember. Once in a great while, our guests would take out a faded, ragged-assed old map and spread it out over the kitchen table. Dad would pore over it for hours, looking at every little nuance and ripple in the paper, trying to glean every bit of information out of it as he could. As the evening unfolded, I would quietly sit at the top of the stairs and listen to what was being said. Closing my eyes, I would lose myself in the exotic places, trying to conjure a picture of what those far-flung places must look like. Visions of mountains draped in glaciers, sweltering jungles, foreign cities and the people who inhabit them all rushed through my head. This is when my desire to travel, to go beyond the horizon and see what's there, was planted like a seed.